It's entirely up to you, so if you want to begin, you have a quorum, you can, or if you want to wait, you can do that as well. And then until he's here, you could just appoint one of you to be the chair.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Can we get a pledge of allegiance? Commissioner Belong, would you mind leading us? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. We have two colors now. Good. Right. Could we give a roll call, please?
Commissioner David Huboy,
Here?
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Here.
Commissioner Stephen Blanc,
Present.
Vice Chair Kevin Henderson.
Here. Verification of agenda posting.
The agenda was posted Friday, December 9th, 2022 at 9:51 a.m.
Okay, thank you. Approval of minutes. Is there anyone who can make a motion to approve or any feedback on the minutes?
I'll make a motion for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we need to do roll call for everything or?
No.
Okay.
No.
All in favor say aye for approval minutes.
Aye.
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 Thank you. We'll move on to public input. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any agenda, to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Speaker cards are available in the lobby. and are to be completed and given to the secretary before speaking. When the secretary calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the record, and speak to the City Planning Commission. If you are joining us by Zoom, please click on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you are joining us by Zoom using a cell phone, please press *9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note that state law prohibits the Planning Commission from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Thank you. Do we have any speakers?
I have no speakers.
Okay, we'll close the public comment. We'll go to item 1 on the agenda, minor subdivision 2018-3 extension. Can we please get a staff report?
Adriana?
Minor subdivision 2018-3 extension. We're bringing it back to you post CEQA initial study. Just as a little background and reminder, this one is located in the downtown mixed use zone. It is a subdivision to 3 parcels. Oh, sorry, originally approved back in 2018, September 27, 2018. So the lots themselves are not, they're not, what's the word? The minimum lot size for this zone is 35 feet, and lots 1 and 2 are 21 and 24 feet respectively. Lot 3 actually meets that requirement. Contiguous lots are existing commercial on either side, and it is adjacent to an unnamed alley, which is 12 feet wide. The proposed project will not allow for future residential development, as it would not be compatible in the mixed-use zone for a new single-family residential. This is the parcel off of Hawkins. This is the alley that where the utility line was to be undergrounded, and condition 11 had been removed back in June. This is another angle of that alley. So the original approval was in 2018. It's set to expire in 2020. A letter of extension extended it to 2022. In June of 2022, the condition number 11 had been removed by Planning Commission. And in August 2025, staff brought the extension request and was extended 90 days in order for staff to conduct CEQA initial study due to the undergrounding of the pole being removed from the conditions. On November 17th, 2022, we brought it back to the commission and asked for additional time, which you granted. And now that that has been done, Kimley Horn completed their focused traffic circulation analysis. What they found was that the average alley widths in the United States exceeded 20 feet. The smallest one they were able to find was 15 feet, and that was in Idaho. Across the board, they were all required a 4 feet lateral offset from the curb. The alley, Hawkins Alley, or well, that's what we call it, the unnamed alley, spans 12 feet. If the pole remains in place, the alley is reduced to 9.4 feet. The U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highway Administration requires a 4 feet safety clearance for the utility pole from the edge of the right-of-way or the curb face. The CEQA initial study identified significant safety impacts that must be mitigated to less than significant level, or a environmental impact report must be prepared. The finalization of the CEQA initial study is pending Planning Commission direction. So your direction will determine the finalization of the CEQA initial study. To give you a little bit of background, since August, staff met with the applicant during a pre-application meeting, which the fee was waived for this pre-application meeting given the background of this project. Staff advised the applicant that the SNA and the CUP had expired in 2020. Staff advised the applicant the map was not in conformance with local, state, and federal statutes. Staff advised the applicant if brought forward to the Planning Commission, staff would recommend denial. In an effort to work with the applicant to submit a project that is in conformance with legal statutes, staff received authorization from the city manager to waive the application fees for one SNA and one CUP to be submitted to staff. The applicant requested staff to bring the map extension forward to the August 25th, 2022 Planning Commission meeting. October 26, 2022, I clarified the events that you saw before you with Ann Hall, applicant, via email regarding the pre-application meeting and the offer to have SNA and a CUP fees waived to apply for a project that was in conformance with the municipal code. So on November 30th, we received the preliminary analysis from Kimley Horn. On December 1st, we met with Ann Hall, Alan Brookshire, Erica Frazier, who is a senior planner who is drafting the CEQA initial study, and myself, and Eva Kelly, senior planner or planning manager. We discussed the preliminary findings with the applicant, along with options to either move the utility pole or to underground it in an effort to mitigate the safety impacts that were found during the initial study or during the analysis done by Kimley Horn. The applicant refused both options and requested a meeting with the city manager and city attorney prior to this meeting. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough time to schedule that. We tried several times, but it just aligning everybody together it was very difficult to coordinate. And then according to an email dated December 12th from Ann Hall, it appears she was able to speak with the city manager regarding this project. So that brings us to staff recommendation. The Planning Commission can choose one of the following options. Adopt a resolution denying minor subdivision 2018-3, or direct the applicant to underground the utility pole and allow a one-year extension of the map, which would mean that Planning Commission must provide findings for the statute inconsistencies and direct staff to complete mitigated negative declaration at the expense of the applicant. Number 3, direct the applicant to move the utility pole and allow a one-year extension of the map. This would also include Planning Commission must provide findings for the statute inconsistencies and direct staff to complete mitigated negative declaration at the expense of the applicant. And number 4, approve the applicant's request to modify the conditions of approval. This would mean that the Planning Commission must provide findings for statute inconsistencies and direct staff to bring the item to City Council for approval of proceeding with an environmental impact report at the expense of the applicant. Staff recommends the Planning Commission select option 1 for this item. If you have any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I don't have any questions.
I have a question. You mentioned a few of the options about that Planning Commission must provide findings for statute inconsistencies. Could you expand a little bit, please?
So if we're going back to how the lots are inconsistent with the municipal code, so what staff's job is to do is to go in and do findings. So we find that, usually we find it's consistent with the code, and then that's part of a recommendation for approval. In this case, it would be why you recommended it for approval. And in this case, I guess that would.
Yeah, so you would be finding or making findings as to the reasons why you would approve it, although it does not comply with the code. So you would find that for X reason, you're willing to approve it despite it not complying with the code. So just your rationale for your decision, essentially.
Okay, and so this was approved at some point, and at some point in time, there was no municipal code that was that this project was violating, correct?
It was recommended under the direction of previous management. So,
I don't think that answered the
yeah,
question.
Previous staff made a recommendation to approve the project despite it not complying with the code.
Okay. Previous staff meaning, oh, not us, but you guys. Someone who worked for you guys before.
Right.
Okay.
So when we bring it back for review, for like an extension, we're revisiting new codes in the existing codes. And that's where you have the option to add more conditions. Whenever you bring something forward for an extension, you have that ability to remove or replace or add on conditions. So that's why we re-examine it. It allows you to have that opportunity.
Okay. And when you say that as a planning commission, we need to provide the findings, is that something that we're expected to do live in a meeting like this, or would it be something that we would do in a special meeting, or could you expand on that?
You would have to do it tonight as to explain the basis for your decision. You don't have to articulate them perfectly, you know, as long as you're able to explain the reasoning for making the decision. Staff could draft them. But it's essentially just creating a record for the future as to why this decision was made. So, for example, it would have been helpful when the previous approval was made if there was some explanation as to why it was approved despite it not complying with the code.
Thank you. So if we provide findings, they would be recorded in one of those resolutions that whereas and whereas, like that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think I don't have any other questions. Did any other questions come up with the fellow commissioners?
So as a clarification, then, we last talked about granting, 90 days extension to start a preliminary review or CEQA review, and Kimberly Horn initiated that preliminary review, and that, as you stated in the staff report, this is what they have come up with so far on the way to a CEQA report. It's a preliminary report that Kimberly Horn did, and we're kind of at a point now where we're reaching rather almost like an impasse in this report. At this point, where is it looking as if to do a full-fledged CEQA analysis, that it seems to be that I'm kind of reading between the lines that this is not going to be looking very favorable. Is that what you're?
So by removing the condition, which wasn't on the original approval, it did prompt us to have to look at and analyze the safety elements of having that pole in place. By doing that, it prompted us to go through Kimberly Horn to do an assessment. So they did an assessment on the safety of that pole, of that alleyway, and utilizing the alleyway as a primary entrance. And the results are in your packet of what Kimberly Horn came in, their assessment. And then Erica took their assessment and was able to draft the initial study. And so that initial study basically takes everything into consideration, and it's a determination that, you know, you have to either mitigate these safety concerns, or you have to go full-fledged EIR, and which is a whole other process.
Back in the original, and when this application first came before this board, it was not, of course, we know now that we have a violation of the zoning ordinance, the allowable use for detached homes in a mixed-use zone. That was not brought up initially, but I think it's always been an issue with this utility pole, has always been an issue from the very beginning. Is that correct?
Yeah, and technically speaking, this is an extension just for the map. So their site and architectural and their conditional use permit had expired back in 2020. So if they wanted to come back with their original plan, they would have to resubmit their site and architectural and their conditional use permit. So right now, it's just the map, just the subdivision. And, I mean, technically, they can come in and do commercial if they wanted to. But, so what you're approving is the map and any of the concerns that had came up with the map itself.
I see. So when we're looking at the map, but not necessarily the SNA, the single-family
Exactly.
detached, right?
Yeah, which
Okay.
are no longer valid. They have to resubmit for
I
it. And then
see.
those would come back for you, back to you for review and for approval.
So if they would resubmit for going back, since they've expired, then they would have to, now we know, they would have to follow the current,
Yeah,
current
staff would
zoning-
evaluate it
zoning
based on,
designation for the mixed-use zone.
yeah, staff
So
would
they could-
evaluate it based
They
on
wouldn't
that.
be able to come back and then apply for single-family detached on this project.
Technically, their ability to apply isn't held back. What it is staff would evaluate whatever their application is, and staff would make a recommendation to the planning commission based on whether or not it was in conformance with the municipal code, which, yeah,
Okay.
so.
Okay,
Is there any information about cost difference between undergrounding and moving the utility pole?
Not that I'm aware of. I believe we had that conversation with the applicant and asked if they had any idea, and I don't think they had even an estimate on what it was to underground it, but from what they said, it was a significant cost to underground it.
Right. Okay, and if this was to occur, it would be something that, it would be work that would be performed by PG&E? Is that correct? Or the
We
city, or-
have started the process to contact PG&E and put in an application in regards to the findings of the Kimley Horn study. And so I don't know if Erica, did we submit already?
So PG&E directed us and the applicant to submit to them for the relocation of the pole, but we need direction from tonight and an agreement with the property owner to start that process. But PG&E is aware of the issue, and they seemed willing to work with everyone to get it moved. No costs were discussed with them, but that was the first step. We reached out on behalf of the applicant to see, what can we do to help them out? And PG&E seemed willing to work with everyone involved to get it moved out of the alley.
Okay, so, I mean, could it potentially be that PG&E takes care of the cost to move?
It's hard to say with PG&E. They didn't say no, so that's important. They could have told us no, it's your problem, or we have no interest in moving this pole, but they seemed willing to work with everyone, so
Okay.
that's a good first step.
Okay, thank you.
Was there any reason why the applicant refused to move the pole or go with underground? Did they state why?
They indicated to us in the meeting that we had with them that the cost would be pretty similar, and as Adriana mentioned, that they're extensive probably costs, but we don't have a number. I think that our engineering team said that it should be less money, especially in this particular case, because undergrounding would require going into several different properties in their backyards, but I can't say for certain that they are not the same cost or different.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission? Okay, I think we'll move ahead to public comment at 6:30.
Okay.
Do we have any speakers?
Yes, the first speaker will be Ann Hall.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. I am here once again on the issue of Allen Brookshire subdivision. Tonight specifically, we are discussing the extension of the tentative map, although much of the staff report revolves around the power pole in the 12-foot alley between San Benito Street and East Street. The staff has gone to great lengths at the applicant's expense to prove that the pole must go away in some fashion. The Kimley Horn traffic report searched through many codes and references in an attempt to come up the requirements for an alley width. The report comes to the conclusion that the traveled way must be 15 feet and the lateral offset from the pole must be an additional 4 feet, or a total of 19 feet clear. The staff report never explains how the city has a 12-foot alley when they determined that the minimum is 15 feet. And now that they have set the criteria, will the city fix all the other alleys in town? The alley behind my house does not have 19 feet clear to a pole, or does this only being applied to my client's project, which is what it appears to be. However, the issue of the pole is a bit of a red herring. Even if my client agreed to underpound the pole, the current staff has made it clear that the project CUP and site and architectural have expired, and they will not support an approval of those going forward. The project was approved in the 2018 under the exact same zoning as there is now. Two similar projects were approved and built in 2016 and 2017, one of them a block away from this project. So the fact that the interpretation is now different is a difference of staff, not a difference of the zoning code. And new planning staff determined in April of this year that this project does not meet zoning and take it on as a mission to see that it does not get built. Dealing with staff on this project has been disappointing, with long periods of no response and staff reports that include half-truths. Tonight, staff spent 10 minutes giving you a presentation, and I do not have time in the 3 minutes allotted to me to detail the many inconsistencies and inaccuracies that we feel is in this report. Over the course of the past 4.5 years, since the site and architectural and tentative map were approved, the city has accepted CUP fees, improvement plan check fees, map check fees, building plan check fees, and various other application fees, all based on the original approved project. But apparently the city can just change their mind. I have been told that the city attorney agrees that the project does not meet current zoning, and then they cannot honor mistakes of past staff. Several times allusions have been made to previous city staff that they did things incorrectly. If I do things incorrectly, my client can fire me. He cannot fire the city. We are forced to deal with whatever staff is in place, regardless of their competence. And the handwriting is on the wall that the city will not allow this project despite all the efforts. But will the city take any responsibility at all for the current situation? Since Mr. Brookshire will be forced, after 4.5 years of following the city's directions, to start over at square one, will the city waive not only the planning fees, but also the engineering and the building and the map check fees? Staff has provided you several options, none of which really close the loop in a realistic way. Request you give direction to staff to allow a project they deem, can I finish my sentence?
Yes, please take another minute, please.
We request that you give direction to staff to allow the project they deem conforming to be submitted sometime in the next few years with all city fees waived throughout the process. If it is beyond the capacity of the Planning Commission to provide this direction, I request that you direct staff to bring this item to City Council for decision. But there's no point in going forward with the project as designed, because this has been an uphill battle for the past 9 months. We'll go forward with another one, but we'd at least like credit for all the money that's been spent to the city.
Could you remain, is it okay to ask her, to have her remain so we can ask her questions?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
at your discretion.
Okay, I think I would like to know if the commission has any questions for Ann.
And the issue with PG&E and possibly relocating that pole, what is your take on that?
We had a project recently that relocated a pole about 2 feet, and it didn't have any transformers on it, it didn't have any other services on it, and that was at least $20,000 to move that pole. This pole has a transformer on it, and like I said, it serves 5 other homes. In my experience, moving that pole further away from those homes makes those power lines going to those homes longer, which they don't do on their own, which means PG&E has to replace them. So I don't see moving it or undergrounding it being a whole lot of cost difference. And then the option of, and to move it means to move it onto the applicant's property. I mean, I don't see that as exactly being a desirable outcome either. But again, like I said, even if we move the pole, even if we agree to move the pole, the site and architectural and CUP have to come back and they're not gonna get approved. So you're just kind of beating our head against the wall at this point.
Is that alley still closed off next to 7-Eleven?
No, it is, as of October, it was opened.
Okay.
Go ahead. Okay.
That was, all right, further questions? Thank you, Ann.
Okay. Any discussion from the commission?
We do have another speaker,
I apologize.
Alan Brookshire.
Okay.
Can you pull up the alley and picture the alley and the front house too, 927 San Benito Street?
This one or this one?
Well, since the alley's been cleared now, 927 San Benito Street, their only off-street parking is a garage that the only way they can access it is via that alley. So, they're fighting me tooth and nail on this project because of this pole. And it's become a health and safety issue. But the only avenue for the front house is the same as would be my back project, the back part of my project, when they would travel down East Street, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? So the people on 927 San Benito Street, when they pull into their garage, they back out of their garage, they go down that alley east towards East Street, and they have to go by that pole still. So if you're calling that a health and safety issue, you opened up the alley, and it's going to be like that forever unless that pole gets moved. How are you going to move that onto my property? Is there an explanation why it's a health and safety issue for my project, but not 927 San Benito Street? Who do I ask that question to? I can address planners, or who do I address?
At this meeting, you addressed the commission.
Okay, I would like to know why that pole is a health and safety issue for my project, but not for 927 San Benito Street. Also, when this issue was approved back in 2018, we talked about people that were, Eva was involved in that. And when we had this Zoom meeting a couple of weeks ago about this issue, and they brought up these things, these options for me to move that would, available to me to move the pole. None of them are viable options. They all involve me throwing a bunch more money at the project. But I would like to move forward. I'm not sure that it's ever going to get done. Obviously, the planning department doesn't want me to do this project. I was hoping that you guys could direct them somehow, some way, where I can move forward. Do you understand that if I put a different building on that project, say I would go back to square one, I put a different building on that project, that pole's still there, right? The pole's still there, and it's still a health and safety issue for 927 San Benito Street, correct? Do you have any questions?
Well, regardless of what you propose on your project, that it's correct, that pole is gonna be an issue regardless. I mean, if it's commercial or residential or whatever. It's an existing, what's called an existing non-conformity.
Right, but if I put something else on that parcel that doesn't involve my building using the alley. Okay, so all the access is from Hawkins Street. The pole's still there, and it's still a health and safety issue for 927 San Benito Street. Yes or no? They still have to back out of their driveway, their garage, and go past that pole every time.
When you say 927 where exactly, where is that in
That's
location
the house
in
directly
reference to the
south
site
of,
plan?
it's the house directly south of 7-Eleven.
Eva, can you pull it up on?
And yeah, to show the garage, how the garage
Google
butts
Drive
up to
or
the alley.
Google Maps for him.
Can we go to the site plan so we can get an idea of?
That's 927 San Benito Street. The alley is closed at that point. I mean, they made it their driveway. So you go farther down east, down that driveway, and their garage butts up to the alley. You follow me? Here's the alley, it butts up to it. So their only off-street parking is they drive east down the alley, pull into their garage, and then when they want to leave, they back out of their garage, and it's a one-way alley. They have to go east down the one-way alley, and they have to go by that pole, the health and safety issue pole. And it's okay for them to continue to do this, but not for my project. Is that correct?
Do you, where's, so,
I'm sitting there, the picture
I'm
is
still,
not.
I'm struggling a little bit to
Okay.
this garage that you're referring to.
I don't know how to point to it. The view is not good. Okay, if you go farther, right back there behind the house at 927 San Benito Street. Right there, right there where
I think
Oh,
it's,
okay.
I think it's the white roof.
Their garage, there's a garage door that it butts up to the alley. It's,
Okay.
The alley runs
Mm-hmm.
east and west, and their
Yeah.
garage door
On the other side, okay.
is right on the alley, right on the south side of the alley.
I see that.
So,
now.
so
Okay.
that's their only way in and out of their garage,
Mm-hmm.
is to traverse this diabolical pole passage.
Right,
So, whether I change my plan or not, that's always going to be there.
they're gonna have that problem until they try to do something with their property, until they have, make improvements, and then it's gonna come up.
But if it's a health and safety issue, why is the pole still going to be there? If a health and safety issue for health and safety issue for my project, it's a health and safety issue for 927 San Benito Street, correct? Wouldn't it be?
True,
Okay.
but that's an existing nonconformity there, and they're not proposing a project.
Okay.
There's the difference.
Okay.
Do we have any other speakers?
I have no more speakers and none on the Zoom.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing at 6:43. Any discussion from my fellow commissioners?
Well, it's unfortunate that I feel for the applicant. He's gone through a lot of expense on this project, and mistakes were made, you know, and I'll share the blame. I mean, I was on the planning commission when we approved this a long time ago, and it was not brought out that single-family detached is not a allowable option in the mixed-use zone. Wish that was brought up at that time. It's not saying that they can't do a project. It would have to be a different type of project without having access from that alley. It's possible that they could do something, but the way this is proceeding is almost to the point where they're gonna have to change directions, because even getting more expensive, and the outcome is not looking very promising for the applicant. In terms of moving the pole, I mean, we really didn't have a in-depth discussion about it. I know PG&E has been notified. It's possible. I mean, I know that was to underground is what I would consider as being technically infeasible, and I said that when we talked about it last time. Moving the pole, I don't know. It's something I think could be worth having a further investigation on that option. I'd like to see if there could be a project, and it could work for both the applicant and the community and not have an issue with a safety issue. I feel uncomfortable approving anything that is a safety issue, although knowing that back in those days, you know, we're coming across legal nonconformity. It was legal nonconformity back in those days, and now we're looking at it with a fresh eye because there is a project to consider here. But as a planning commission, for us to make findings to approve something knowing that it's a safety issue, I'm struggling with that.
Three of the things that kind of stood out for me was, especially that I'm kind of caught up with, is first, it was already approved in 2018. We're gonna cross that bridge. Next, there's, as Ann stated, 2 projects very similar have already been completed. So, and then the most important thing, I think, is now out of desperation, they're willing to scrap the whole plan, just have to start over and go to the city council because we're somehow not getting it done for them to move forward. You know, I don't know if we've explored all options, if there's more we can do on our part to try and help them out in good faith, but I think based on what they've done and what they're trying to do, maybe we should look into seeing what we can do a little bit more to try and help out. Like I said, the being previously approved, I don't want to make a habit of going against previous commissions, fearing that maybe later on when I'm no longer here, someone else is going to dissect something I put together and then change it. So I want to make sure I set a good standard.
Yeah, the issue I see is that we're dealing with a very old part of town and just kind of a quirkiness to it. Just things were done differently a long time ago. And then now we have a modern project coming in, then these issues are starting to come up because of that, because of the way things were versus how, the standards of today. So that's a difficult issue to deal with. As far as this safety, I don't, it's a very thin alley to begin with, so I don't see that somebody's going to be driving through the alley at high speed. Usually there's a bunch of potholes anyways. That's another reason why you don't drive fast through an alley. So I'm not seeing a huge safety problem with the pole. The fact that I believe the pole is not on his property, so it's just this principle that because someone wants to do something on their property that they have to deal with a telephone pole that happens to be near them. I find it a bit unfair. I would really like to see if PG&E can at least at least deal with the pole issue. I know there's other issues with the project, but I would really like to see if there be a way that PG can deal with that issue. So, yeah, I'm kind of at a loss as to what to do. We're being told we have to make findings tonight at this meeting. So we need to come up with a strategy how we're going to move forward here. So,
Well, for tonight's meeting, would previous commission already approving it be grounds for the findings that we need?
yeah, I think that would be our rationale. That's what I said. I think in August was that this has been approved before, and it seems a little unfair to change things now. So I guess that would be a rationale.
Are you asking me if that would be adequate or?
First Kevin about
Okay. I think you would, if that's the reason, then that would be one of the findings, yes. So, or if your discussion related to safety or any of, I mean, I would recommend first, when you're ready, voting, so that you know whether or not you even need to make findings, because not all of the options require that. So if you vote for one of the options, and I don't recall which numbers they are, that would require the planning commission to make findings, and after you've made that decision, you can take time to make those findings.
And if I might just quickly add, also tonight, because we're discussing the initial study and finalizing that potentially into either a mitigative neg declaration or an EIR, something like that, they're noticing deadlines for that. So tonight, your direction and your recommendation and your recommended findings will finish up that study if that's the direction, and we'll be coming back to you, and we'll have those findings in the resolution for you at that time, so you can review them and make sure that that's the findings that you made. So that, yeah, if that helps.
You're talking about finishing the initial study?
Yes.
Mhm.
So 2, 3, and 4 that we have on the screen, we have to finish the initial study either in a mitigated neg deck, which is relatively straightforward, or potentially the EIR. And that'll have to be properly publicly noticed for the CEQA period, and we'll be coming back to you. And the findings you give us tonight and the direction on the findings, we'll bring that back to you with that finalized CEQA document for your review, if that is what's directed tonight.
So, I mean, the applicant made a statement that sounds like they're want to scrap the project at this point. So, would it make sense for us to to just do option 1, so that, you know, there's no more costs being acquired, you know, any more costs being racked up? Does that make sense?
So on option number 4, I'm sorry, you asked a question and I didn't hear an answer.
Yeah, there was no answer.
I'm sorry.
Did you want me to ask it again, or did you hear it?
Yeah, that you were saying that option 1, they would have to scrap the project, and then hopefully, you know, that no other fees would need to be paid. But is it, in terms of fees and concessions of fees, is that for us to, I've never, is that for our purview, is for concessions of fees?
So the city council adopts fees, so they can waive fees, and then the city's municipal code then delegates that authority to the city manager as well. So I don't actually think that the planning commission has the authority to waive fees.
Right.
So I think you could probably direct staff to ask the city manager to waive the fees. But that's the authority for waiving fees.
So if I could get some clarification on option number 4. Approve the applicant's request to modify the conditions of approval. Planning Commission must provide findings for statute inconsistencies. Okay. Direct staff to bring item to City Council for approval of proceeding with environmental impact report at the expense of the applicant. I can see findings for to consider going forward because of the both issues. Although I'm going to take it a step back on that. Actually, I talked about the commission. The chairperson Henderson also noted that in that area, there's going to be, you find a lot of inconsistencies with the municipal code based on the age of these, of the infrastructure and the structures in that area. It's pretty commonplace. And to move the pole is, I'm not sure how feasible that is. I'd like to have a little bit more information on possibly what PG&E's role would be and possibly relocating that pole. I know that to underground it to 6 different properties is, to me, almost is an impossible task. I don't see how that can be possibly done, but when we're talking about this tonight, to actually relocate the pole, I'd like to have a little bit more information about that, and see what, if we can get PG&E to weigh in on what the feasibility of that option might be. Location of the pole from PG&E, I mean, and how much it would cost, and who's gonna pay for it.
So is that gonna be like a 5th option? We're looking to do an extension on ourselves?
Yes, that's a
You would
5th
just
option.
continue the item to a future meeting.
Continue the item for more information.
Yeah.
You just have to
And I'd
give
like
an
to get more
extension for
information
them
from
too, though.
PG&E regarding this. Before I can really say, before I feel comfortable about findings for statute inconsistencies one way or the other. I'd like to have some more information about this. And I feel for the applicant, because I know he's been, I don't know how many times that we've been looking at this.
This is the first time we've heard anything about correspondence with PG&E in the city.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know that that was an option.
I'm curious if, again, what PG&E's input would be on this. You know how you guys feel?
I would be in favor of
Continuing, yeah. Right. I feel we should all, because mistakes were made from previous planning staff, planning commissions, I think we should all try to help the applicant the best we can and come up with something that has some type of common sense approach to this. Although this utility pole is certainly, it's, yes, Stephen?
I'm saying that it sounds like, the pole's the main issue here.
Yeah.
For me, I have a hard time moving forward, approving the project, even though there's been findings of inconsistencies and safety issues.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I mean, I didn't sit on any previous ones, so it's hard for me to.
Commissioner Belong, if I could ask to turn on the microphone.
It's hard
you.
for me to approve the project with those findings in place, and I do feel for the applicant as well. If we went with option 1, does that completely scrap the project altogether, and the applicant has to come back and?
So what would happen is their map would expire,
Mhm.
and they still have that option to come back with an SNA and a CUP with their fees completely waived. So staff will work with them on bringing a project forward that is actually in conformance with local, state, and federal statutes, and bring that forward to you guys without the map. So it'd be one lot, unless they.
It would be like a commercial project which would not have to rely on egress from that unnamed alley.
Exactly, yeah, so they
And
could,
it's-
they
I
could
guess it's
use
possible
access
that can
from
be done.
Hawkins, yeah.
It's possible it could be done without having to rely on that as a
Yeah.
transportation or an access point.
Or
Where the
it would be a
utility pole is.
downtown mixed-use compatible project that staff would bring forward. I mean, they could propose
Mhm.
whatever they want, but staff would do our best to bring them into conformance, to
Mhm.
help them design a project that's in conformance.
And by doing that, the pole's not an issue anymore.
Yes,
Mhm. So it would be a different project where the pole would not be an issue
yes.
on option number 1.
Where primary access would most likely
Mhm.
be from Hawkins Street, which is usually ideal. At least that would be the direction that staff would recommend and
Mhm.
try to assist the applicant as best to our abilities.
And work with them to the best of your abilities in terms of the
Yeah, we can only advise
Fees
so
that lie
much. It's
ahead.
up to them to, yeah, it's up to
Uh-huh.
them to provide a product or design that is compatible
Mm-hmm.
with current statutes. And staff has been very good about outlining exactly what's non-conformance and what could be.
And then if we decided to go with option 4, the project can move forward as planned, but we would just not be in conformance then, basically.
So what would happen is it would advance to the city council for approval,
Mhm.
because they would have to give approval for it to go full-fledged EIR, which is
Because of the inconsistencies.
yeah.
Well, if you go with, you know, and now I'm more I think about it, I'm thinking, I'm leaning to option number 1, actually. Because if you go with an EIR with that pole as it is and rely on that as a transportation issue right there, as access to the site, I don't think it's gonna work. That's my take on it from, I mean, we've been talking about this for quite some time.
Mhm.
And, I mean, you got 12 feet, you got a utility pole, and you got a transportation there. I mean, if we approve something, there's gonna be might be a problem, regardless if it's a nonconformity issue, because it's been there for a long time. Still, we have to take responsibility and do what's right. So I think in that respect, I'm looking at option number 1.
And that's kind of why I was struggling with 4 as well.
Yes.
I mean,
I mean, that's just a lot of time to do an environmental impact report, knowing there's gonna be issues with that utility pole. I don't think that's really gonna work very well for the applicant. I think it's time that we consider a different project that doesn't rely on that. Maybe mixed use or commercial project that you don't need to have that as an access point, site access. You've already got the other side. So, Mr. Chair, what is your take?
I mean, option 1 was my first thoughts, I guess. Seems the one that would make this sense, given what the applicant said. So, is there any further discussion on this?
So I just want to be clear, if we did go with option 1, we would be seeing another project at this address.
The applicant would have the
Potentially.
option, the applicant would have the option to bring forward a site and architectural and a conditional use permit application project to you, at no cost to them.
Okay. Well, with that being said, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead. So, for minor subdivision 2018-3 extension, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution denying MS 2018-3 and help the applicant come up with a project that is in conformance with the municipal code and does not have to rely on site access around a utility pole. We have a motion. Any discussion?
At no cost to the applicant. I'm gonna put that in there too.
Okay. We have an amended motion. Any further discussion on the motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second that with the amendment in there.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner David Heboy,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Blum,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kevin Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to item 2. Minor subdivision 2018-6, site and architectural review 2018-23 extension. Staff report, please.
Yes, thank you. This item is for an extension of minor subdivision 2018-6 and site and architecture review 2018-23 for the Right 13 cannabis facility. It is located off of Wright Road. These first slides are just the original project approval. This project was before the Planning Commission at the August 25th meeting where a 90-day extension was granted. So it's a subdivision into 4 parcels and the ultimate development of 3 cannabis greenhouse buildings. These are just the original approved elevations for the 3 different greenhouse buildings. At the August 25th meeting, staff's analysis of the project had some concerns with consistency with the code, including a lack of parking. There isn't a cannabis parking analysis in our code, but the closest 3 options in our industrial uses are general industrial warehousing and research and development. The original approval had 55 spaces, and warehousing at the smallest amount had 341 vehicle space requirement. So staff found a significant lack of parking. On the original approval, there's also a concern with the stormwater facilities. The code had changed since the original approval to require stormwater to be undergrounded. And we also found that there were some inconsistencies with some of the land use policies in our general plan, particularly regarding the variation of design of the greenhouse facilities, in particular the ones that front onto the public right-of-way and are visible from Wright Road. And there was concerns with pedestrian and bicycle connectivity to and within the project, and the surrounding North Gateway commercial areas, which there are general plan policies and guidelines regarding having access through and surrounding the North Gateway properties. I did look up a few just examples of some cannabis and other large greenhouse projects that show kind of some examples of potential articulation that could be considered on those front facades as just an option. I was looking into it. There's some options for different materials and things like that could be used to help articulate those facades as a possibility. And so at the August 25th meeting, we found those inconsistencies with the municipal code about lot dimensions, frontage, circulation, landscaping, stormwater, and parking, but it is consistent with the mitigated negative declaration. So at the August 25th meeting, there was a 90-day extension to allow staff and the applicant some time to amend the plans regarding stormwater. But otherwise, the Planning Commission directed staff and the applicant to maintain the original conditions of approval. We did receive revised plans from the applicant, which are shown on the screen, where the stormwater is undergrounded, and they were able to provide a significant increase in the parking and modifications to the circulation slightly to accommodate that parking. These are the revised plans. We did do a parking analysis of the revised plans with the additional parking, and in addition to the 3 land use types, at the August 25th meeting, the Planning Commission approved a different project, the Felipe 9 project, and they made a finding for a ratio on that greenhouse facility at 1 space for each a little bit over 2,500 square feet of gross floor area. So we did analyze the revised plans against that parking ratio as well. And if the Planning Commission did want to make a similar finding, the revised plans is still less than all of the 3 identified uses in our code, but it is greater than the approved Felipe 9 ratio. So the Planning Commission could, if they so desired, make a similar finding on the parking for this project. And the total includes parcel 4, which doesn't have a building on it, but there would have to be some kind of shared parking agreement across the 4 parcels. With the amendment to the parking and undergrounding the stormwater, there were some amendments to the landscaping plans as well. In the review of this project against, or these revised plans against the code, there's still some missing information in order to fully evaluate these plans against our code, including some dimensions and some of the plant types and percentages of deciduous trees, et cetera. Those types of things aren't available in this plan set, so that's a missing item that we just can't evaluate whether it's fully consistent with our landscaping section. This project is in a bit of a unique situation because it is the extension and it's the 90 days where we're reviewing a potentially revised plan set, so it's not a new project in that regard that we would evaluate for incompleteness, but there are some items that we noted in our review of the new plans that would normally have been requested if this was a new project to fully evaluate. So there's some missing parking numbers and labels with bicycle and loading spaces. A couple of inconsistencies noted within the plan set, including the building square footages and no information about the small guard towers that are on the site. A couple of modifications, including removing the emergency vehicle access. So we would have just requested clarification that that is proposed to be removed in this revised plan set. And that's fine with staff, it gets removed. I think our fire department and police department have stated in the past that their preference is to move away from EVAs, but that is a change we noted from the original approval. Some details on trash enclosures and stormwater post-construction information was requested from Recology and the engineering department respectively, as well as some information requested from the engineering department regarding some traffic trip details, signing and striping across the site, as well as showing frontage improvements on the plan set. In our analysis of this new plan set, as we did with our analysis of the original plan set, we are still finding that architecture, which wasn't changed, to be inconsistent with those variation articulation sections of our general plan, particularly along the south-facing facades as mentioned. And we do note that the revised site plan, it does have a lot more pedestrian and bicycle circulation. There's ADA and walkability and crosswalks shown within the plan, which is great. But part of the North Gateway, as well as the San Felipe beautification precise line study that was recently adopted by the City Council, because this was approved in 2019, it's not conditioned to contribute to those multimodal transit projects. And it is still a concern of staff that it is potentially cutting off a significant circulation point for surrounding North Gateway projects. However, we do still find that the plan is consistent with the mitigated neg deck that was previously adopted. So that's my very brief analysis of the two plan sets. The options that we've identified for the Planning Commission are to adopt a resolution approving the extension. And we have prepared a plan set or a resolution for the Planning Commission. As mentioned, staff cannot make the findings of it meeting the general plan, either the original approval or the revised plan set. But if it is the pleasure of the Planning Commission to make this, we can take those findings and have the resolution prepared with an extension for however long the Planning Commission wants, as well as either plan set if they so desire. However, staff's recommendation will be option 2, which is a resolution denying the extension, subject to the findings we've prepared. And our recommendation is to bring back a project that is compliant with the code and would allow staff the time to fully evaluate those incompleteness items that we're noting in this revised plan set. And then the Planning Commission, of course, has the option to continue or give us direction for clarification or anything, but I did note that the 90-day extension granted by the Planning Commission will expire on December 26th.
Any questions for staff?
I guess in summary then, we focused on, this project was initially approved, or had a conditions of approval that we stipulated that would remain without further conditions of approval. And primarily, the issue was undergrounding the stormwater, which the applicant has complied with. But in the process, am I correct to say is that other issues have come up with the revisions that were made, primarily to an undergrounding the stormwater, with the issues of, I know we talked about the aesthetics that,
Yes.
but the parking, I'm a little confused about how the parking was deficient. Or was it made more of an issue?
There was no, it's definitely a lesser issue on the revised plans than on the original approval.
Okay, it's a lesser issue, okay.
Yes, they've increased. So the original approval had 55 vehicle parking spaces, if I recall correctly from my previous slide, while the revised proposal has 275 vehicle parking spaces across the 4 proposed parcels. But as you can see, that's still less than the 852, 340, or 1,023 that are identified in our parking uses table in our code, which there is a section of our code that for a use not identified, the director is, and in this case the Planning Commission, is intended to use these as a guide for that. But because the Planning Commission recently adopted for a similar project a reduced ratio, which does limit future uses specifically to be cannabis facilities. But the Planning Commission made that finding for the other project, so we compared this proposal to that project, and it does exceed that approved ratio. So you could make a similar finding for the parking, but it is not technically compliant with any of the identified uses in our code still at this point.
Do you think that in the future, when we look at the parking requirements, that we're going to have new categories?
Yes, I would like to do a full analysis of our parking, a formal parking study as well to justify our numbers and to significantly increase all of the uses that we have in not only our parking use table, but our other use tables, and make sure that anything identified in a use table in the code is also identified in the parking use table.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
So I have a question regarding the parking. So the facility, has the applicant stated, I mean, how much parking they actually need? Is this going to be a retail facility? Is it going to be just a work site? Is it going to be, and how, I mean, if it's just a work site or a research center, have they stated how many employees would be working there?
I know that they have stated it. Let me see if it's in here. They have in their, which is part of the attachments, their letter that they provided to us with their resubmittal for their parking evaluation. They stated that in a survey of operating facilities of this size, the maximum number of employees per shift would be 64 per each parcel. And using these staffing numbers, the total parking spaces required for 3 buildings would be 192, and they're proposing 255. So they have stated that this is sufficient for the number of employees that they are expecting at this site, which was similar to part of the findings that the Planning Commission made for the Felipe 9 project as well. It is a limitation on the use, but an acknowledgement that the proposed use, this is a sufficient amount of parking.
And to also carry on what Steve was saying, it's not a retail, it's just manufacturing, right?
Yes, it is just a cannabis
There's no
cultivation
retail component here.
facility.
Okay.
Could you go back
Yeah.
one slide? Maybe one more. Okay. So my question is, I guess back in August, we made a motion to grant a 90-day extension, which you said expires December 20?
Yes, that's 90 days from the September 26th expiration.
Okay. And then I believe we said subject to conditions of the, I believe it was the 2018.
Yes.
I may have the dates wrong, but basically a
It-
previous
Right.
resolution and findings.
Mhm.
Okay. So I'm curious why, after receiving that direction, why, I guess the staff is coming back to us talking about more issues, and I don't, more issues, even though we've already kind of said we want this project to just be in conformance with the previous. So why more conditions, or why are you bringing up more issues at this point?
So this is an evaluation of the revised plan set that came in after the Planning Commission's 90-day extension. So the question or the decision tonight for the Planning Commission is there's the original plan set, and then there's this revised plan set. You directed us regarding the original plan set, but to underground the stormwater. And so the applicant did underground the stormwater and gave us this revised set. But these are the staff's findings in review of the revised set. There are some items that we would like to see if this was a new application. But the issues that we're finding with the new set is what we've identified. So
I mean, the direction was underground the stormwater, and then I believe the applicant, I think, trying to act in good faith, they tried to address some of the issues that were brought before. Okay, I'm just trying to understand. So, but you're saying based on the new plan that came in, you're still going to just say your evaluation of it?
right.
Yeah, okay.
In the original application, for example, on the issue of plan identification, did the original application, did they define the landscaping to
No, so at August, when we reevaluated the original approval under the current code, we did find issues with the landscaping plan set, some missing items and some things that we said that we weren't able to tell if it did or did not meet the code, just because some things are missing from there. But with the extension request, that is the original plan set that was approved, so that's what's being considered.
So these issues are remaining from the original, are you saying, is that correct? For me to
Yes,
say
so
that?
there were issues on the landscaping in our analysis of I don't know if I put a landscaping slide actually in here, but in the August 25th report, there were some areas where we weren't, in our review, there just wasn't the item there for us to say whether or not it did meet that section, just because it was missing from the original plan set as well.
Okay. Thank you.
So it seemed, the extension was 90 days, and based on what happened last commission meeting and with emails that we have sitting in front of us, it seems like there was maybe misunderstandings or kind of lack of communication, and I believe, based on your response, that you really haven't had enough time to do everything that you would want to have done. Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that that's a fair assessment, yes. I think that the revised plan set is a significant move in the correct direction, but I think that in a normal circumstance, we would have liked to have at least an opportunity for the applicant to respond to that and then be able to come back to the planning commission. But with the timing that's allotted in the 90 days, there just isn't enough time for that second round between noticing requirements and things like that.
Do you recall how it became 90 days? Was that a suggestion from the applicant or from staff? Do you happen to recall?
Yes, I do. So the 90 days came from staff, and we had a resolution that was attached to that 90 days, which stated findings for the planning commission of the findings that staff had found for the project, as well as a finding that the item was going to expire and there wasn't enough time, so that the planning commission was adopting this resolution, and it had, I believe, 6 conditions. Standard, the first one stated that it was a 90-day extension, which went till December 26th, and the purpose of it was specifically to amend the plan set. And there was also a condition that the applicant would return plans by, I believe, a September deadline, to allow staff the time to get that accomplished by the December 26th meeting. So the 90 days was a recommendation of staff, but there were contingencies within that resolution to allow staff to operate within those 90 days.
Okay.
So then the 90 days, that the applicant did comply with the 90 days to the extent of making the revisions with this regarding the stormwater. But in the process of that 90 days, there was still, does the 90 days include time for the applicant to respond to these further items, or when does the 90-day expire?
So what staff had been intending to work with the applicant was that we had been talking with the applicant previously, and so they had said they were working on the stormwater. We had had several meetings with them and with their engineering team and our engineering team as well regarding the stormwater. So there was it was either 3 or 4 week turnaround for them, and then that allowed staff, which put us into September for that resubmittal. And then that would have allowed staff our typical 3 or 4 week review. We do a route to our development review committee. It was a limited route, but it went to engineering, fire, Recology San Benito, and probably police and your cannabis affairs.
So it went through a DRC after they made the revisions
Yes.
with the stormwater. And when did the DRC meeting occur within the 90 days?
So we didn't have our meeting. It was just routed with our electronic route, and we give the DRC 2 weeks. The reason that the DRC meetings, we have a monthly DRC meeting, but we've been working on routing on a rotational basis, because having a monthly DRC meeting for a new project, we have an incompleteness deadline, and the monthly DRC doesn't allow necessarily that meeting to occur within that 30 days. So we are we try to route to the DRC within 2 business days of receiving, and we give the DRC a full 2 weeks on a kind of rolling basis to review all the projects that are going in. And then when those comments come back to planning, it takes us about a week or 2, which is typically within that 30-day time frame that we have for new applications, to review and compile those comments and write our own comments, and then we get those back to the applicant. So that's our DRC process, but there were the timing of the November meeting, and there was obviously a request from the applicant to go on to that November meeting. It wasn't allowed, and at the time, as we could discuss at the last meeting, staff's initial recommendation of the 90 days was a December recommendation, so that was our understanding, which is why we didn't place it on the November meeting when we were still reviewing it. But then we had back and forth, and the concern of the actual motion at that point after that, which is what we discussed at the last meeting.
Any further questions?
One question would be, should we go with option 1? What's the actual extension time we would be granting?
So the extension time, the initial request is for 1 year, although the planning commission and staff, and that's available to you as well on the podium. The applicant has since then, I believe it was last Thursday, requested additional time, because they have a PG&E letter, so they're needing until at least mid-2024. So if you go with option 1, we would just request that the planning commission tell us how long of an extension you're giving. 1 year, 18 months, what it is up to the planning commission.
Okay, I think we're ready for the public comment. We'll open at 7:32. Any speakers?
Yes, the first will be Gary Coates.
Good evening, Vice Chair Henderson, members of the commission. Gary Coates here on behalf of Right 13 LLC. I appreciate, thank you, Eva, for the detailed description. There's a lot of things that are in there, a lot of stuff that has come through, I know, for you. I want to recap a few things. One of those is, as you know, we've had two times this project has come before the commission for action. Those both times were found consistent with the general plan. The architecture was discussed previously because of the uniqueness of a greenhouse affair, a building, and the requirements. It was found that the architecture as presented was acceptable because this is not a standard industrial building where you can start to revise elevations, articulation. These are large grow areas which you cannot do that. It just does not financially work in the process. So the commission itself, I think, at the last meeting recognized that and felt that the architecture was acceptable as submitted. We did submit on the 10th of October, we did submit landscape plans which show the kinds of trees, the number of trees, and names of trees that were on it. It's in page L1.1. So that was submitted at that time. There was also discussion when we had our first approval and then the extension approval that the findings were that the project was consistent with the general plan and that, as an example, under circulation, bicycle, pedestrian, this area is required under your bicycle plan to stripe the street out in the front of the project for bicycle access and use, which we will do as part of our improvement plans when we build the project. The sidewalk area that was out there, it was questioned as to whether or not it would be installed at the time, whether it would be deferred, only because it connects to nothing. The closest sidewalk is over a quarter mile away, and that's in front of the Ford dealership, way down the road. So there are no pedestrian access points, nor are there any bus routes that come to this specific area down here. But we still agreed that we would look at trying to put in some kind of an access up to San Felipe from the project if that was deemed appropriate. At your last meeting, the commission also stated that you wanted to have, there were several areas. One of them was the underground storm drainage system, which we did do, and we complied with that and agreed. If you remember, Mr. Orozco in that evening said yes, that we would install that and we would do that, and that has been done. Second thing was to remove the fences so that there was circulation for fire protection, police protection, and free movement of ADA requirements across the site. We did that as well. Third thing that was requested had to do with the parking, and I think staff's gone into that in detail. We actually are over parked to what is used for the standard of business that we're proposing, and that's based upon actual uses that we've gone out and surveyed. And also, the owners of the Right 13 LLC have other facilities that they're operating, so they know exactly how many people are on shifts and what occurs. So we've done that. So that has been in there. So I think to look at the consistency, I would disagree with staff that I believe the project is consistent. The general plan, policies and goals, it has adhered to those in its own unique way in the sense of the use being a greenhouse type use. And twice before, it was found to be consistent with that. So I don't see any reason why it would not be consistent at this point. We're not requesting a new project. We're requesting an extension of an existing approved project. As to being considered incomplete, you honestly can't consider an extension process as incomplete when it's just approving the project that was already found complete and approved. So if I may wrap up, Mr. Chair?
30 seconds, please.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So our recommendation is, our request of you is that you approve the project for the extension. We can't continue it because we'd run out of our 90 days. So we would request that you do approve the resolution as staff has presented. Your findings would be to reaffirm the findings of the original extension and the original conditions of approval, which found it be consistent with the general plan and with your environmental document. I would be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Vice Chair.
Any questions for Mr. Coates?
Just one, it was brought up that you were thinking mid-2024?
The mid-2024, oh, and thank you for asking that. It was requested or asked by the commission as to how many years or how many months we would want. We would look to get 24 months, 2 years, based upon the information from PG&E. And that is the reason for the extension, is that we cannot go through and process and build until we have power. And that's what PG&E is looking at providing for us.
Okay. Any more questions for Mr. Coates?
Just a question. If the extension is approved, would you work with staff on these incompleteness items?
We'd be glad to, yes, absolutely. We'll be happy to work. We had a conversation today with Eva, and more than happy to work with staff to try to resolve any of those issues. We're in compliance with what is being required. We accept, in the sense like architecture, we can't do that because of the kind of building it is. We can't articulate, move things in and out and things of that nature. But locating the loading areas, making sure landscaping's done right, those things, absolutely. We'd be more happy to work with them.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat? You said loading areas, and what was the other thing?
Loading landscaping.
Landscape.
In other words, ensuring that we have the proper planting. We do call them out, but if there's other varietals that are requested, we're happy to look at those and install those. That's not an issue for us.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, next speaker, please.
Great, thank you.
Yes, the next speaker is going to be Patrick Orozco. Just give me 1 second. Okay, Patrick, you should be able to unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can now. Go ahead.
Okay, fantastic. Would it be possible, just in the sequencing, to allow my colleague Matt Knorr to speak before me, and then I'll close, if that's okay?
If that's okay with the commission?
That's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so the next speaker then will be Matt Knorr. All right, you should be able to unmute, Matt.
Great, thank you.
Go
Good
ahead.
evening, commissioners. I appreciate the opportunity. I'd first like to just start off by correcting some inconsistencies in what was presented tonight. When we came back and submitted our amended plans, we submitted those on October 8th. And we repeatedly followed up with staff on multiple occasions on if there was any questions, issues, concerns, any additional clarification we could provide. At no time did staff provide any comments to us. In fact, it was not until we actually received this evening's Planning Commission staff report that we saw the DRC letter, which you will see in your packet is dated December 8th. That is literally 2 months, 60 days after we submitted an application. So for staff to sit here at this meeting tonight and outline a process that they say is only 30 days, where they issue our application or route our application 2 days, and then the DRC is in 14 days, and then another week for them to compile comments, is just a bunch of baloney. I mean, the sandbagging again that is occurring by staff to us on this project, and it's not just us, you heard it from the prior application and other applicants at the last 3 or 4 meetings that I participated in. It is just the lack of communication and processing things in a timely manner. And to provide a DRC letter through a final staff report, not even sending it to us directly, it's just unprofessional. In regards to a number of these items that are quote unquote incomplete, we take exception to that. The bicycle parking is provided. It is not an incomplete item. Loading spaces are provided on the site. It's not an incomplete item. The inconsistency with the building square footage, okay, 1,000 square feet plus or minus, maybe the civil engineer did not correct, but the square footages are generally there. Emergency access, vehicle access, that's not required. Fire department has a loop access around the entire site. The emergency vehicle access off an adjacent property it's just totally an extra item if we wanted to consider it. Trash enclosure details, trash enclosures provided on the site. They are there on the site. We provided the same level of detail on this submittal as the prior two submittals, which were found acceptable and were granted the extension and original project approval on. So again, and then staff here tonight presents facade options for a project, and they provide pictures of projects that are just totally irrelevant. Those projects and photos that they showed are for indoor grow facilities. That's not this type of project, and not this type of architecture. And then in regards to parking staff starts to talk about, you know, hey, we just don't have enough parking and then nothing compatible. You know, that's just a total subjective statement. Staff has no clue, no experience with cannabis. We actually do. We own a cannabis cultivation facility. We've owned it for multiple years. We know what the required parking is. And we have provided more than what's sufficient for this type of project in use. So it just, the incompleteness comments are just a bunch of baloney, and it's just staff's way of just, again, trying to just kind of just put the screws to us. And for some reason, since this new staff has kind of come in, they have some reason taken exception to every prior approval
Allow 30 seconds,
that
please.
prior planning commission or other staff has made. So with that, I'll conclude and defer the rest to my colleague Patrick Orozco. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Okay, Patrick, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commissioner. Good evening, commissioners. This is Patrick Orozco speaking. Matt's very passionate about the project, as am I, and it's tough to bridle that. I do want to communicate that the process has degraded to something that is pretty close to dysfunctional. It's been very, very frustrating, one of the most frustrating circumstances of my career. One of the frustrations is aligned with the realities of the clause that time kills deals. And in our circumstance, what we have discovered in the last 2 weeks is that PG&E's power grid is fully subscribed, so much so that they cannot provide us with 100 amp panel to power a well. They have provided that they have no time frame during which they will be able to provide power. They have no current plans in process. They can give us no guidance or direction. So the Amazon project that was behind us by 3.5 years has jumped ahead of us and used up all of our allocation for our project, which means that our request of you tonight is no longer to extend for 1 year, but to extend for 2, because we are completely powerless, in part as a result of delays, to bring anything forward. Our project, modified projects, no buyer of the property could do anything with it. And so, that's where some of my and my colleagues' frustrations lies, that this is, unnecessarily complicated, very, very time consuming, and at some point it becomes unfair to represent that we have done something wrong, or that the project has been deficient in some way. So, I know everyone's trying here, but it does, I'll tell you from the applicant's perspective, feel like we're being presented with unreasonable standards, and there is no standard that staff will accept in accepting it, endorse a recommendation for approval of a project. We hope you disagree and that we'll be able to continue to do business in your community, and do request that the current extension run for 24 months, just so we don't have to go through this again. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Before we ask if there are other speakers, does the commission have any questions for the applicant? Okay, next speaker, if any.
I don't have any other speakers in the chambers, and I have no more speakers online, Chairperson.
Okay, we'll close the public comment at 7:47. Okay, what are our thoughts, fellow commissioners? Are we leaning, is there any options we're leaning towards? Go ahead, sorry. I'll let you talk.
Oh, I think that, this is a project that's been it's been on the drawing board for quite some time. And it's kind of a project that it's making its own. I know we've looked at cannabis projects before, but nothing, I think, of with these type of issues that come back, and it's gotten this far. I mean, it's getting closer. I mean, the undergrounding of the stormwater was a major issue, and I know we've talked about some of the other issues, the architectural part. I've made comments about that. It's on the aesthetics, the redundancy of it. It's greenhouse. It's a greenhouse, but it's low profile. It's like rhythmic in a way. I don't find it. I know it doesn't have a focal point, but it's like an agrarian greenhouse type of a look, which is, it shows form follows function in a way. I mean, I don't think the aesthetics, we need to revisit that, or I need to reiterate what my opinions were last time we talked about that. But in all the processing and with the timing of the DRC and the response, I think it's, the applicant deserves more time. Now, how much more time, I don't know. And the PG&E thing is like a monkey wrench. I don't know if with the PG&E, how that affects really a planning decision. That's more like a means and methods for the construction. So I just, those are my thoughts at this time. But I'm welcome what you guys think about it too. First of all, I guess the first paramount decision that needs to be made is whether or not to grant more time. And if your consensus is to grant more time, how much more time? Or not grant any more time. I don't know how you guys think about it.
I think if we do grant more time, we know what time they need. It makes no sense to go anything less than 2 years, because we'll just be reviewing this again in the same manner. Right. I mean, if the project's going to move forward, they need 2 years extension. So the one thing that if I was to approve more time, it seems like staff has incompleteness I'd like that more defined so that the applicant knows what they need to address. And then that way, I mean, within that 2-year time period, or as whatever the staff needs to address and give the applicant a more defined list of what the incompletenesses are and what needs to be addressed, then I'd like to see that if we're going to move forward, you know, so that the applicant at least knows what they need to do in order to address the issues that the staff is having. So that's just my thoughts.
So I have a question for staff. So if we granted an extension 1 or 2 years, so will you be meeting with the applicant more, or is it just going to sit on the back burner for a while, or what will the process look like?
So the next steps after Planning Commission approval of an entitlement is typically a review by our engineering department. In this case, they'll need to submit a parcel map for review by the engineering department, as well as improvement plans for review by the engineering department. The issues of the incompleteness items, it is a tricky one, just because it's something that would typically be required of any application, but as we know, it wasn't present in the approved plans, some of the items, and then they're not here in the revised plans, so it's tricky. I think you could direct the applicant and staff to have those in the improvement plans, but some of them are, you know, landscaping and those types of things. We also have a water efficient landscape application. And then I think it would be important for the Planning Commission to identify anything that might, if making those amendments to address potential inconsistencies or incompleteness items, were to make changes. For example, if it affected parking, how many parking spaces would you be willing one way or the other, so that we know and the applicant knows if changes are being made to address certain things or to address engineering items. At what point is the plan set not conforming with the Planning Commission's approved plan set? I think that's part of the something that we'd appreciate having direction on.
When we looked at this quite some time ago, the aesthetics of the greenhouses, that wasn't an issue back then, and that's what was approved, correct?
Correct, it was not addressed.
So I don't think, I'll just go down the list of items. You know, the parking, I don't have an issue with the parking. I think the parking is for manufacturing cultivating greenhouse based on the number of employees. I think the parking is adequate. The aesthetics is adequate. They've undergrounded. They've shown the accessibility, pedestrian accessibility around the buildings, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so those should not be issues.
Mm-hmm.
So, what am I missing here? Some of the incomplete items, it was mentioned, testimony of Mr. Coates, that the landscaping was identified.
There is an identification of the landscaping, but it's that one symbol represents multiple species, and the species proposed don't necessarily reflect the sizes and variety requirements of the code
Okay,
sections.
so there could be some additional clarification there.
Sure.
Yeah. But I think those items have been addressed. And in terms of time, 2 years. I'd like to see this project get underway, really. I mean, if 2 years is the time to see some progress made and not revisit some of these issues that we've agreed upon in the past with those original conditions. I mean, that's the way I want to proceed on this.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with the 2 years, and my concern is how how will issues not keep coming back? You know, it seems like every time we have a meeting on this, there's always new issues. So what needs to happen so that all the issues are ironed out, and you just need more time to work with the applicant? I guess that would be my question for staff.
So it kind of depends on the direction from the planning commission tonight. If I do have in the draft approval resolution a blank for which set you are extending, so that staff and the applicant know which improvement plans we're working off of, and I have the dates of both to fill in that blank for you at your direction. But it would be, unless you wanted us to come back before the planning commission again, which I don't know that that is what you want, it would be working with the applicant at the improvement plan stage, and they would work with our engineering team mostly for that, to correct items to make sure that the improvement plans can be approved, but it wouldn't come back before the planning commission unless that's something you're telling us to do. If you're telling us to work with the applicant on completing these plan sets, for lack of a better term, and addressing those comments, that would require an additional extension, and then we'd come back to you. So normally completeness is addressed during the application review phase, and we wouldn't bring an incomplete item to the planning commission, but that obviously wasn't the case in the past when this was originally approved.
Would it be helpful, Eva, to get consensus on some of the laundry list of items
Yeah, I think
that I mentioned? Like, what about aesthetics, parking? Are any issues from my fellow commissioners on that?
No.
I think there's adequate parking. I mean, it was stated 275 spaces were gonna be available. And according to the applicant's employee, was at 192. I mean, that's plenty of parking, I would see. So I don't have any issues with the parking. There was some statement about bike parking. There was only 13.
there's no bicycle parking
No bicycle
number.
park?
There are spaces, areas, I would say, identified for bike parking, but there was no number given. So that could be something helpful for the planning commission to tell us and the applicant how many bike parking spaces you'd like to see in those areas. We don't really have anything to go off of, but
Was it ever requested for the applicant to provide a statement of operations?
not in formal, no. The previous plan set had bike parking areas as well. It was just one of the comments we had in August that there wasn't actually a number, so we couldn't evaluate that number. But the parking issue is, as we've discussed, that there's likely a ratio of less that is adequate for this type of use. So I think the planning commission could identify a ratio or we have 3 100 square foot buildings. They've identified 64 potential employees, so perhaps 5 or 10%, and making that in the areas is something that we can make sure that that is addressed, if that's helpful.
I think during the staff report too, you mentioned something about guard shacks or security.
Yes, there are 2 small guard shacks identified on the plans. Let me see if I can back up and circle them. We don't have any details from the applicant in either plan set. One is here and one is here. These are security details. So if you had any direction on what those would look like, or a setback distance from a building or anything like that, we could make sure with the applicant that those are meeting a requirement that the planning commission might have for them. But we don't have any details on those to adequately discuss them.
I don't see where these guard towers are indicated on the drawings.
So perhaps here, it's not on this sheet. I don't think they are labeled in the plan set as guard shacks, but we don't have elevations or setbacks to them. One is here at this entrance gate, and then at
And
this
they're not
entrance
shown
gate.
on the elevations?
They're not shown on the elevations currently.
Okay. I think that would be an item that should be completed. They should be shown on the elevations. If they're been, that's an omission.
So is it consensus of the commission that we should have guard shacks specified? Okay.
So I think we're okay in the parking? Okay,
I
the
was-
aesthetics,
I was
okay,
good with
with the
the parking.
exception of the guard shacks?
I mean,
The guard, I don't think that was a correct vernacular for that. Guard towers? Guard shacks. Oh, boy.
So I believe another issue that was brought up was square footage not being clear. So could you help us understand what you need for that?
Sure. We don't really need anything on this item. It would just be that if this was a new plan set, we would have asked for the consistency in the plan set. I think that these 3 buildings have been identified as square footages. Whether that square footage included the guard shacks or not, they'll be addressed. It's just, in our review, we pointed out things that we would have typically asked for as a completeness item to clarify on plan sets, but we're in a unique situation of it not really being in a completeness review. So I think that in the final plan set, whatever it may be with building and with engineering, all the square footages will have to be consistent. I don't think that there's something particular the
Right.
planning commission needs to address
square
on that.
footage is, I agree, should be consistent. But I think, it's, some of these issues that we're talking about tonight really, I don't see why they can't be resolved. I know it's helpful to talk about this at the planning commission level, especially the parking. But if we're okay, and we've heard that, the number of employees based on this type of operation, that we're okay with the parking, there should be some clarification on the planting. The planting might have to be tweaked a little bit, and the guard towers or guard enclosures should be included on the elevations. I mean, these things it should be able to be resolved within a reasonable period of time. I don't see why it would take this long to resolve these inconsistencies, now that we're reaching consensus on what the applicant has to do and what our thoughts are on the parking, the aesthetics, and some of these other issues. So once we have a consensus from the planning commission on what the applicant has to do to complete these items, I don't see that it would take an exorbitant amount of time to do it. And so, and I'd like to see this project move forward, so.
Yeah, I mean, they're gonna have 2 years, I guess, even before they can get started, so there's definitely time. I just wanna make sure that these details don't have to come back to us again. That's what my
Right.
hope is, so.
Right. And I think it's helpful to show consensus here on what details need to be addressed.
Yeah, okay, so did we cover the bike sufficiently? Do we need to say how many spaces, or?
6 per building, I believe.
Okay,
The 6.
I think it's also in the green code, the California Green Standards Code, a number of bike stalls per total parking. I think you'll find that in the California Green Code.
It doesn't go to the cannabis thing, but it does give you the guidelines.
Oh, it does, okay. And also, you'll, not only that, but electric vehicle stations, so that's all in the Cal Green Code.
okay, I think,
I don't know if do we have a bicycle parking in the municipal code that
We do, so some uses have bicycle parking requirements. A lot of them are like 5 to 10%. We don't on warehousing, which is our lowest ratio industrial. But I think that this proposal has 275 spaces, so I think the planning commission would find that 275 spaces is adequate, and then
Yes.
identify perhaps a percentage, 5 or 10, and or as Gary mentioned, potentially like 6 per building. You could find whatever parking for bicycles that you deem adequate, and then those details will be shown in the plans as we get through the phases. But I think it would be helpful to have either a specific number or a specific percentage of that 275 that we can use when we're evaluating the bike parking when the details come in.
Mr. Chair, may I ask the applicant a question? I think Gary, you said you looked into the Cal Green Code on the number of bicycle parking requirement for, did you find anything on?
We did,
campus?
and I think Eva is kind of mentioned it. On campus, it doesn't go in there, but the closest we could find, which was more of a packing type of facility, it was anywhere from, in this size of building, it would be 6 per building. It was a total of 18 spaces if we use the most intensive to that kind of a use. So I think in using that, it's between that 5 and 10% number, as Eva had mentioned. And that's acceptable to us. I mean, we don't have any issue with that. We've got areas set aside that can accommodate that number.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Another issue that came up was EVA. So are we fine with the EVA that was on the plan?
That definitely is, are you addressing EVA?
Yes, I think what staff had mentioned is originally we had an EVA that was shown to go out to San Felipe off of the property which we determined at one time was a property that we were under contract, which we no longer are under contract with. So in order to accomplish that, we got rid of all the internal fencing and now have a complete circulation system that we worked with the fire. So there's 2 entrances, 2 directions, so that we don't just have one entrance into the project.
Did DRC come up with an EVA?
No, we
requirement?
don't have a requirement. The only thing that we noted was that it was removed from this plan set, and we were just requesting clarification that that was the intent of the applicant. That's our only comment on that EVA. The original approval had it. This one didn't, requesting
Well, if the fire's
clarification
okay
that that
with,
was correct.
You know, circulation around the buildings, I'm fine with that. Not having to address EVA.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other issues that, maybe we need to discuss. I did have a question, Eva, you mentioned 2 plan sets. So are you talking about the original plan set back in August that did not have the undergrounding?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So we have the original plan set, and for the purposes of this resolution, that was received by staff, stamped received on July 13th of this year. And then we have the 1010 revised plan set.
Okay.
So the planning commission would just identify which plan set that we're working off of in their
Okay.
recommendation.
I'm just trying to understand. So you had made a comment that you weren't sure which plan set we, as a commission, we were specifying here. So why was that a question when I guess we already said back in August that we wanted the stormwater undergrounded?
Because in August, the planning commission did identify that stormwater should be undergrounded, but they also specified that it would be potentially added as a condition of approval. And then this plan set has some other changes that we've discussed. So there is a possibility that you could approve the original plan set and still have them underground, but potentially in some different way with engineering. So I would tend to agree that this one does address more of the comments of staff from August 25th, but you do not have to approve this plan set. You could approve an extension of the original plan set as well.
Okay. So is it the consensus of the commission that we're talking about the second plan set? Okay, just want to, okay, all right. Okay, can you go forward in the slides to the choices, please?
Sure. And I have a copy in case you all didn't have your full packets or didn't want to dig through them of the resolution for item 1 as well, just on your podiums.
So option 1 is the option for extending time, and it mentions MS 218-6 and SNA 218-23. So those are the same conditions that we approved back in August, correct? With the exception of, well, I'm sorry, I'll let you clarify.
Sure.
Yeah.
So those are the two items. MS 2018-6 is the tentative parcel map to divide into 4 parcels, and SNA 2018-23 is the site design. So the 3 buildings, parking, stormwater, all of those things. So the 2 projects together are the project you're seeing on the screen, the subdivision and the site and architectural review.
Okay, thank you. So what is the pleasure of the commission?
Well, I think what the applicant was pretty much saying was that time is actually gonna be their friend rather than kill the project. And I think it sounds like we all want this project to go forward. I'm comfortable with option 1, should we grant the extension of, 2 years with incompleteness items being met that we listed. I think they showed their willingness to go ahead and start off as quickly as they did, undergrounding and trying to work with us. I think 2 years should be more than enough time for them to punch out a rather small, incomplete list that's would help.
Do we have a motion?
Luke, are you making that a motion? You know how to work it. Is it one motion then for a resolution for extension for both the site and architectural? And
Yes, you can make one motion to extend both, and then, unless Jennifer corrects me, I think you could make this motion, and then we can discuss the findings that you're making for this resolution that you're adopting after that motion, if that's.
I would just insert, so just read number 1 if that's your choice, and then just insert after an extension of time, just say of 2 years, if that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Okay. Anyone else want to make the motion?
So I'll make the motion to adopt a resolution approving an extension of time of 2 years for the MS 2018-6 and SNA 2018-23, subject to the conditions of the approval and the findings to be made by the Planning Commission.
Okay, thanks. We have a motion. So a motion's been made, and you mentioned we have to make findings. So do we make a second and then do findings, or, okay?
Yeah, do your second and then your vote, and
Okay.
then you can make your findings.
Make the findings,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner David Heboy,
Yes.
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Stephen Blum,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kevin Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries 100%.
So as far as findings, back in August, we said that we believe that this project should be held to the standards of 2018, with the exception of the undergrounding of the stormwater. So is that an appropriate finding?
Yeah, so I think it would be something along the lines of whereas on August 25th, the Planning Commission directed the applicant to underground the stormwater, you know, and then your finding would be that they did do that, in different words. I would also suggest a finding related to the reason for the 2 years as opposed to 1 year. So, you know, that the applicant has whereas the applicant has indicated that they, you know, won't be able to have access to adequate power until 2 years from now.
Yes.
We find that a 2-year extension is appropriate, you know. This can all be wordsmithed, but
Sure.
those are the ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe what you've said is consistent with
With
what we would like. Any other findings that you could
there
think-
may be something related to the inconsistencies in the plan set, so, you know,
Yeah.
whereas there was a limited amount of time to prepare the modified plans, Planning Commission finds that, prior to the expiration of the SNA or something along these lines, you would, the applicant would correct the inconsistencies identified by staff at the December 15th meeting. And then,
And generally, the two that we kind of have for our SNAs and maps is that you find that it's consistent with the general plan because, you know, you found that the aesthetics are adequate for the general plan. You think that the use is unique and the requirements of the building dictate this type of architecture. And then that you find that the circulation has been addressed in the October plan set. And that, you know, as Jennifer mentioned, potentially whereas you find that the timing wasn't allowed to address the all of the inconsistencies with the code in the 1010 plan set, that with minor changes that will be addressed at the improvement phase, it will be consistent with the code. And I wasn't writing that down, but we can work through it together and I will write.
No, I like the way you said that. No, I agree. I
You can
agree.
check the
I
recording.
think that 2 years, you know, to address these comments that we've reached consensus on. Parking is adequate. The aesthetics was originally approved and is acceptable, with some minor, the plans do need to show, be updated to show the guard towers, the aesthetics. That 2 years would also give the applicant enough time to respond to the DRC comments that came relatively late in the process. And I think there was also some clarification on the landscaping, we'll make sure it's drought tolerant and that type of thing. And the bicycle parking would be like 5 to 10% of the, or actually, what do we agree upon on terms of bike parking? 6 per building.
6 per building.
So 2 years should be enough time, and then PG&E, when PG&E gets on board, they should be able to get going. Well, those are my findings.
I believe we have our findings.
perfect.
Thank you.
As long as Eva got them.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's not like I don't like, I mean, it's not like I don't, I enjoy you coming to our meetings, Gary, but I think you need to be on a recess, okay? You need a break. Yeah. Happy holidays.
Okay, so this is and I'm just gonna confirm, on our be it further resolved, this is a 2-year extension, which will
Right.
be through December 15th of 2024. And this will be for the October 10th, 2022 plan set that was received by the planning division.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
have a 10-minute recess. Okay, we'll continue with item 3, zoning ordinance amendment 2022-3. Do we have a staff report?
All right, this will be Erica.
For a little bit of background, on November 17th, 2022, the Planning Commission reviewed some recommendations by staff as part of the overall zoning ordinance overhaul that we're undertaking. So for brief information, phase 1 is modifications to the code that are where the code is inconsistent with state law. Phase 2 is supposed to be a complete overhaul of our site and architectural review chapter. And then phase 3 would be the rest of the zoning ordinance. It will all get redone. What staff did was we brought a portion of phase 2, so we were calling it phase 2A, for review by the Planning Commission at November 17th. And the reason for that is that when we started undertaking the overhaul of the site and architectural review chapter, all of the other sections in that area, so public hearings, administrative permit review, they all tied together, and we found that we couldn't just change one. But at the same time, we're having a number of issues that staff is facing right now, and we needed to do something now that gives us more time to do the other part of phase 2, so now phase 2B, which is going to take a significant amount of time. So it can't be done in a week, it's gonna take a lot of time. We discussed these proposed minor amendments during that meeting, and at the meeting, the Planning Commission asked staff to bring the items back so that we could give you a better explanation on how we were going to phase in the requirement for site and architectural review. So, for site and architectural review, that section of the zoning ordinance, staff is recommending a modification to now require a site and architectural review for all single-family developments that are 3 or more dwellings. The way that it works right now is all multifamily projects go to the Planning Commission for review. And for single-family, the code says R1, but previous directors and staff took that to mean all single family. So even if it's single family in a different zoning district, it was still not, a site and architectural review was still not required. For example, west of Fairview is zoned west of Fairview residential, and none of those single family projects came before you, even though they're technically not in an R1 zoning district. We were recommending that this to be done for clarity, number 1, but number 2, also that staff can start looking at the design of single-family dwellings. The way the process works now is if I'm a single-family residential developer, I apply for my tentative map. The Planning Commission looks at the map, which is just a layout of the streets and the lots. And then when I'm ready, I apply for a building permit. So staff doesn't get to see the design of the project until the building permit phase. And what we've been noticing is that there's a number of issues that arise during the building permit phase, and we are limited in what we can do at that because it's a ministerial review for a building permit. And also we're seeing a number of developments where the residential dwellings really lack articulation. They're not designed well. They're not of a caliber that we'd like to see in the city. So that was part of why we were recommending the amendment to that site and architectural review chapter. The way that we're going to differentiate site and architectural reviews is if you have already approved a tentative map, then that design review would just be a staff level, and that's a much faster review than Planning Commission because obviously we don't need time to write a staff report, the noticing requirements that go along with a Planning Commission meeting, so that review is quite shorter than a Planning Commission review. So with this proposed change, an applicant could combine the site and architectural review with the tentative map, and if they had a planned development, so they would just have one review and be done. They could also just apply for a tentative map and then request their site and architectural review later. That gives them more time to work on their design, and the tentative map obviously can have a longer life with extensions. So if they, oh, sorry. And just a bit of a reminder, a requirement for design review of single family is actually quite common. We are one of the only cities that do not require it. As you can see on this chart, and we discussed before, the only city I could find that didn't require design review was Salinas, but they still required an application to planning where they looked at plot plans. So what staff is recommending is that you waive this new requirement for anyone that's applied for a building permit prior to the effective date of the ordinance. And obviously, even if you made a recommendation to the city council tonight, this ordinance does not take effect for quite a while. It has to go through 2 readings at city council, and then there's a period before it becomes effective. So there's a window before this takes effect. So if anyone has applied for their plot plan or master development plan at the building permit phase prior to the effective date, they get to keep going through that process. But if they let it expire when they're ready again, that, you know, could be 5, 10 years down the road, we don't know, they then have to comply with the requirement. But this does give a period of time where people can apply now to avoid this new requirement. So instead of just telling you what we're recommending, we've also added language to we've amended this section further from the previous review to add new language that says, for single-family residential developments that have applied for a building permit for a master development plan or for construction of the dwellings prior to the effective date of the revised ordinance shall not require a site and architectural review. Any building permit which is expired shall not be exempt from these requirements. So again, they let their building permit expired. They now need to conform to their new requirements, but there is a long period for which your building permit is expired. This most likely would not happen, but there's a chance that it could. So that's the changes that we've made since the meeting. For planned unit developments, we did not make any changes following the November 17th meeting, but just for a recap, we added a finding and we had a modification to require site and architectural review and a PD to go together, so that when you're looking at their request for setbacks, let's say a setback reduction or whatever they're requesting, that you can see what it actually looks like, to make sure that it does in fact conform to the findings in that section of the code and is, you know, something that you want to approve. For chapter 17.30, again, no changes, but just to kind of recap what it is these are proposed design standards for single family and multifamily. The code right now does not have design guidelines for either of those. And these would really be beneficial to staff as well as the applicant, because we have a list to go off of what we're looking for in good design. For example, I opened a plan set today, and it's a multifamily building that is a blank wall with some tiny windows, and the entire complex is the same color. It would be nice to be able to hand a section of the code that lists what we are looking for, rather than me just asking and they not either understanding, or because we have nothing in their code, there's nothing I can hold them to. So in conclusion, staff is recommending these minor modifications to the zoning ordinance to promote better design and development of single family as well as multifamily residential developments. By requiring a site and architectural review, the city can review the proposed project for compliance with requirements of the zoning ordinance, for example, design, any adopted design guidelines if it was in an area such as west of Fairview, which has design guidelines within it, or if the new chapter is adopted, that chapter as well. And if we needed to, we could place some conditions of approval on the project design if staff felt that was warranted, or the planning commission. By requiring applicants to combine the plan development request with a site and architectural review, you will be able to ensure that the development is attractively designed, it's innovative, or it provides a unique amenity in exchange for the modification to the development standards of the zoning district in which it is located. And by adopting those objective design standards, the city will ensure that single-family and multifamily developments are attractively designed and reinforce the small-town character of Hollister. And that concludes my presentation. We have two options for the Planning Commission. The first is to recommend City Council approval of the amendments to the zoning ordinance as proposed and discussed. The second would be, you could recommend approval to the City Council, but direct us to make a few changes if you wanted to, or you could continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information or clarification if you needed it. And staff is actually recommending that you select option 1.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? I had a question. Do other cities have design guidelines, as you stated?
So yes, some are contained in various areas, either a general plan, a specific plan, a standalone design guidelines document, or within the zoning ordinance. So it varies from city to city. What I noticed as I started working on the design guidelines is that you can see more and more cities are going through this process right now, where they are in the process of creating some objective design standards, especially with the changes in rules from the state. You know, they have to be objective, not subjective. So a lot of cities are taking a look at their subjective design guidelines, changing them to objective, and then just to help staff in this area, a lot of cities are now adopting objective standards. So because it's new, cities are doing this slowly. Obviously, it takes staff time, but I think more and more cities, in the next year will also come online with this. But I've seen a lot of cities that have recently adopted it. A lot of cities are working on them right now, and I anticipate more will be heading in this direction.
So this proposal would be having design guidelines put into municipal code?
Yes.
And could you give just one example of an objective design guideline?
Do you mean versus a subjective?
Oh, did you want
the contrast or just one?
I'm not confusing the two. I just
Okay.
wanted to hear one.
So I'm gonna pick one. So roof line, for the main elevation of any house that has the roof line shall be articulated by incorporating a minimum of 2 of the following. And then there's 4 options, and they pick 2. So a break in the facade plane of a minimum of 6 inches in depth that is carried up the roof line. Any form of roof line modulation, such as step back, height variation, or multiple forms. A change in roof pitch or type, so on the elevation you'd either have a gable and a shed, gable flat, whatever you want to do, so you're changing that roof. Or an uncovered balcony or deck on the 2nd floor, which then the roof obviously comes in and out, so you have a break in that. So that's one. There's obviously many in here.
Will we have the opportunity to review the objective design guidelines?
They're in
To
your packet.
Oh, it's in the,
Yeah, and to that point, staff, we have a lot of applications kind of coming in right now that we're seeing, and single family homes that are on maps that are coming through, and we intend this to be kind of a super temporary measure because of what the projects we're seeing and anticipating to come in while we're still doing that zoning overhaul. So we intend to, during the zoning overhaul this completely again with you guys, but this one is temporary because currently we have no objective design standards for single family and very, very limited design standards, if any, for multifamily. So this is something we can work with for now. That's kind of a basic objective standards that we've come up with based on the state's objective standards list. And we did make some modifications and try to make some clarifications. but we intend to do a deep dive with Planning Commission and Council in the study session as we get to that particular part of the zoning overhaul, if you will.
Yeah, so if I can add, so these are developed with this, the state has some recommendations for guidelines. I also looked at what some other cities were doing, as well as, you know, doing design for so many years. We obviously know objective from subjective. But they're in the zoning ordinance for now. This is giving us, we have, like Eva said, we have a number of projects, and like I said, I opened up a plan set, and it's a wall, a white wall for a 100 unit complex, and I have nothing in the code that says they can't do that. So we are having a number of issues. These are guidelines that would be incorporated later, but our plan for later is this is also why phase 2 is taking so long. Phase 2 also includes design guidelines citywide. So we have guidelines for downtown, we have guidelines for mixed use, we have a number of guidelines that are going into that. And we'll take the words that are here, and then they will go into the guidelines with pictures and diagrams that explain how does this look, or what does this look like? I mean, for now, for the most part, it takes a little bit, but you can figure out what we're talking about with, you know, changing a roof form or stuff like that. But pictures always speak louder than words sometimes. So it'll be a much more user-friendly document at that point. But we don't want the projects that we're seeing right now to get built, because they will be here for hundreds of years looking like that. It's unlikely that the design will get changed for a long time. So that's what we're trying to capture in this very interim place that we're in.
You know, I had the privilege of working with the city of Santa Clara to illustrate their historic infill guidelines. And it showed like compatibility and massing and all that. It was just, I actually did some graphics of historic, and we have quite a eclectic array of historic residences here in our city, especially in down Monterey Street. And I actually kind of did a little quasi illustrations of historic residences here that I thought were really well articulated. Like, and we have like craftsman style, we have Victorian, and I think we have this historic district. So when we're talking about guidelines, especially in the historic district, you know, that to me is really doing single family and design in a historic district, very helpful to have graphics and illustrations to help the applicant. But didn't need to get off on a tangent. But,
What's the
that was a lot of
estimated
fun.
time frame for, so you said if we were to approve this tonight, we're gonna go into a deep dive later. What is that time frame?
So that's a very difficult question, because we get competing priorities from applicants as well as the city council and the city manager. We're hoping to have a study session in February.
Yeah, not to skip too far ahead, but we do have a calendar, and we want to start kicking off regular study sessions with the Planning Commission starting in the new year on that second Thursday of the month. And that's where we'll be starting these deep dives. But as far as the design guidelines, that's a little bit further down the road.
Yeah.
The first thing that we're probably going to be talking about is permit types, application types.
Yeah, so hopefully, depending on how things are going, in February, we at least have some of the permit type sections done for you to look at in a study session. And depending on how long it's gonna take us to get through that, it's really hard to say. So if we did 2 at a time, some might not take so much time. Site and architecture is going to take a lot of time. And then at this point, it would be unlikely that design guidelines would go with it. It would have to follow, but it would be its own standalone document, so nothing in those chapters will hinge on that design guidelines document. That is also going to take a significant amount of work to get it to a place where we're ready to show it to you. It's going to be long, it has a lot in it, and that would probably be its own study session.
So-
Or two.
So this would basically just be setting a standard until there's a more clear.
Yeah, this does two things. One, it helps us out with the projects that we are seeing and helps you out as well. And two, it's establishing a standard moving forward. So then when those design guidelines come in, it's not so much of a shock, let's say. And we've already established the standards that we're going from, and we move forward with those, and then the new ones get adopted. And, you know, we're not catching up projects in anything. They're all, you know, aware of what we're doing.
And all the projects that are already in the pipeline are grandfathered in?
No.
They're not.
There's not that many that get caught up in this. There's maybe two.
Yeah, I think the only projects that are gonna be grandfathered, for lack of a better term, are the couple of larger subdivisions that are actively under construction right now.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Oh.
we're seeing some current planning projects that either already are site and architectural review, like the one that we're having, but we'll have something in the code to look at it against, and findings for you guys to look at it against. That we currently don't have. And then we have a map, I believe, that might be subject, that's actively being reviewed.
So
So a couple of active projects.
for my example project, they just came in for review. They have to make modifications anyways, but I can say the planning commission said yes. We would like you to use this as a template for your redesign. So it helps us with that, and we're not catching any, it's not a project where I'm taking them to you at the next meeting. They're very preliminary.
Any other questions for staff?
I just had one more, and this is just for my own knowledge. So basically, when these permits are given, how, there was talk about them going, if they expired, then they would be subjected to the new rules. What's the standard time for a permit? What's their
Yeah,
timelines?
so I could be wrong, but I believe that the initial building permit is given 180 days, and then they get extended as inspections happen as well. So I believe, like, if you have a year, or what is that, 6 months, in 4 months you have an inspection, and then it's not 2 months, that inspection prolongs it. So they kind of, as long as you're actively working on building permits, they keep extending themselves under the rules of however building permits work.
It's unlikely that anyone would let their building permit expire for a residential subdivision. I mean, it's been known to happen, but it is very rare because the permit fees are quite high. So it behooves them to not let a permit expire. They'd have to apply again and pay all those fees again.
Yeah, I can't think of a project, but it would potentially, there might be a project that has what we call a master plan. So when we have a subdivision in, say, like west of Fairview, which is hundreds of lots, the developers will come in and they'll have a master plan that gets approved, and it's not the actual building permit for each lot, but it's a plan set that shows, we have these 5 floor plans, and each floor plan has these different elevations, and those master plans are approved as a building permit, but then they come and pull individual lots as they're ready to construct, and they say, oh, master plan 1B, that's the one I'm building on this lot. So I can't think of a project that off the top of my head that's in this phase, but it's the only thing I can think that could apply is if they had a master plan now or in like very recently, and then they, for whatever reason, didn't actually pull permits on it, and that master plan was let to expire. But I don't have a project that is in that situation.
I think we're ready for public comment at 8:56.
Okay, I have no speaker cards, and I have no attendees left in the digital audience, so we're good.
Okay, we'll close the public comment. All right, so what was the pleasure of the commission? I think we would be leaning towards option 1. So you would just read if you want to make a motion, you just read it, basically.
I'm comfortable with moving forward with the motion for option 1 to adopt a resolution recommending city council approval of amendments of section 17.24.190 site and architectural review and section 17.24.240 plan development permits and the adoption of chapter 17.26 residential design standards.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second.
I'll second the motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Motion passes 4-0. We'll move on to new business. Item 1, affordable housing presentation.
Either way, if you'd like to sit here, or you can use the thing. Just a quick introduction. Jamila Saka, our housing programs coordinator, is here tonight, and this is in response to, at I believe the last meeting, November 17th, the Planning Commission requested just kind of an overview. There were some questions about affordable housing on that meeting, and so Jamila's here to just kind of give a general overview, not related to any particular project, about affordable housing. So take it away. Thanks, Jamila.
Perfect. Quick question. Before I used to point that direction, is it still? I think it's still kind of. I'm just going to test it real quick. Okay. I was like, it's been a while. Good evening, Planning Commission and staff. Like she said, my name is Jamila Saka, and I am the Housing Programs Coordinator for the City of Hollister. So I work within the Development Services Division. Just like she stated, this was a request at last month's Planning Commission meeting to provide an informational report about some basic understanding about affordable housing. So tonight I'm going to briefly discuss affordable policies and guidelines, discuss definitions and provide examples, and then lastly I'll provide some housing tools and future policies that we will be adopting. So currently one policy established is the housing element. The housing element, which is part of the general plan, requires all governments, cities, and counties to adequately plan to meet the future housing needs of everyone in the community. The City of Hollister will be working on our next housing element, and when adopted, will serve as a blueprint from 2023 to 2031. Written within the housing element is a term that we will learn about tonight, if you aren't aware of, is the term Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or they shorten it to say RHNA. So you may hear in the future us use that term RHNA. The State Housing and Community Development provide each county a regional housing needs determination based on the projected future community housing needs. With the assistance of the San Benito Council of Governments, the regional housing needs is then, the determination number is then split up amongst the 3 jurisdictions within San Benito County. The assigned regional housing needs allocation is then broken down into these specific income categories. And so you'll see where it's written area median income, or we will abbreviate it a lot to say AMI. And so the main ones that we'll be talking about tonight that you'll see a lot in the future are these ones, which is acutely low, which is 0 to 15% AMI or area median income. And I'll go into more specific definitions of AMI. There's next extremely low income, 15 to 30% of AMI, very low income, which is 30 to 50% of AMI, low income, 50 to 80% AMI, moderate income, 80 to 120% AMI, and then lastly, there is above moderate, but I just won't be describing that this evening. So the percentage breakdown does not change, but the area median income may, and that's what I'll be discussing next. So the California Department of Housing and Community Development, or you'll see for short HCD, publishes a federal and state income limit annually. So in very, very short terms, AMI is based on an extensive technical methodology, which assesses a 5-year median income estimate against changes in CPI inflation for specific regions. So AMI is used to calculate an area median income for different programs, both state and federal programs, along with our local grant programs as well. And so each AMI is specific, like I said, to our county region. It's updated every spring. So lately it's been a little bit late, but usually May and June we will receive an updated area median income. And at that time it is effective upon its release. So any program guidelines will be changed based on that change of area median income. And then you'll see in this slide, this is the breakdown for San Benito County's area median income. So the top you will notice is the household size, so 1 through 8. On the left-hand side, you will see the different broken up categories. So acutely low, extremely low, and moving on down. And then bolded, which I should have changed the color now looking at it, is San Benito County's area median income. And so currently right now for a household of 4, that is determined to be $105,100. And so those numbers are terms that we use for different programs, both if it's within development agreements, grant programs, or even local ordinances. We will reference these income levels. And like I said, they're specific to San Benito County and updated every year by the state. And at this time, are there any questions of anything I've covered so far? Okay. I know it can be we don't talk about the subject very, very often, so sometimes it can be somewhat confusing. Before I go into some affordable housing examples, I do want to let our commission know that the following examples are very basic examples of maximum affordable for sale rental prices. There are several factors to consider when determining a maximum price for a homeownership unit or a rental unit. Some of these factors could be approved development agreement definitions. Sometimes those differ than state requirements, or state definitions, changes in interest rates, inclusion of utility or repair expenses, the household size, and utility allowances can all greatly change what is affordable. So these examples presented tonight are very basic, and I will indicate what they will be including. First and foremost, I am going to go over what is the definition of affordable housing based on the Health and Safety Code, section 50052.5. And I will go over and break down each section too, because I know it can be, I have to read it like 1,000 times sometimes. So for a moderate income household, the affordable housing cost shall not be less than 28% of the gross income of the household, nor exceed the product of 35% times 110% of the area median income based on the household size. Additionally, the Health and Safety Code does provide definitions for extremely low to moderate income. And so when we break this down, just looking at the moderate income level for a 4-person household, what this is saying is that a household cannot expend, or they expect a household to not expend more than 35% of their income on their mortgage expense. And so that's what you will see highlighted in blue. You then multiply that by 110% of the area median income. So for a family of 4, at the moderate level, listed in green, is $105,100. Then when you take that and multiply all those numbers, you have an annual expense of $40,463 for your mortgage expense. Divide that by 12 months. So in this example, your estimated maximum mortgage for a moderate income household is $3,371. And again, that's based on the Health and Safety Code definition. So again, in this example, it is somewhat basic. We are looking at a moderate income sales price for a 4-person household. So a 3-bedroom unit, 4-person household. This household has a moderate income level of 110%, so at approximately $115,000. And this example is based on the income for San Benito County. Using the interest rate that was present at the time with Cal HAFA, it's 6.8%. This household example provided a 5% down payment with a 30-year fixed rate loan. And this includes items like your property tax, your mortgage insurance, homeowner insurance, but does not include any utility or repair expenses. So when you use the state definition and calculate all of that with the bedroom cost, their interest rates, the estimated maximum moderate sales price is $448,000. And again, that will break down to roughly a mortgage of $3,371. The next example, really all that's changing in the example is the interest rate and the household's down payment that they provided. So in this example, the interest rate is 8%, and now the household only provided a 3% down payment, but nothing else has changed in this example. The purchasing power of this household at the estimated maximum mortgage is $398,000, still saying that their maximum mortgage expense is $3,371. At this time, I do like to pause and ask if there are any questions or anything that I can go into more detail with. If not, I will move on. Perfect. Okay, so this example will be going over affordable rental prices. Now again, this definition is using the state health and safety code, section 50053. And so for very low income households, the definition uses the product of 30% times 50% of the area median income adjusted for the family size appropriate for the unit. And then for lower income household, it is the product of 30% times 60% of the area median income adjusted for the appropriate size of the unit. And then again, too, the state does provide definitions from extremely low to moderate income. In this case, you will see that it uses the term 30%, where with the mortgage it was 35%. Typically with rentals, the state deems that if a household is spending more than 30% of their income towards their rental expense, then they are cost burdened. So this is why in this example, or in the state health and safety code, it uses 30%, not 35%. And so this next one again is broken down, and I will describe. So you will see in blue, that is the 30% times 50% of the area median income for, again, a household of 4. But because this example is using the very low income bracket, that's why you see a different number for the area median income. So you would use $52,550 because that's the area median income for the very low income bracket. So you wouldn't use that $105,000 that we had seen in the moderate income level because this example is for low income. And then when you calculate that, the annual expense is $7,882. So when you divide that by 12 months, the estimated maximum rental is $656. Again, this example, like I had stated in the caveat, does not indicate an included utility allowance. So there are a lot of times with rentals that they will provide and indicate a utility allowance within the expense. So meaning if the rental has to use an estimated $200 in utilities, that is included in the maximum rental price. Next, the lower income example, again, is for a 4-person rental. So you multiply 0.3 times 0.6, and the area median income for a 4-person household at the lower income level is $84,100. So when you take that and divide it by 12, the maximum rental expense in this example is $1,266 for a family of 4. Any questions regarding these slides? Great. I provided this slide in the report to just indicate and show that this is the Housing and Urban Development, or what is known as HUD, their fair market rent and what they use for different programs like our Housing Authority rental voucher programs. And so this is San Benito County's estimated fair market rent values. Again, these are specific to our region, and they are fairly adjusted somewhat annually, but it really depends if there are really significant changes. And next, I wanted to also highlight specific housing tools that jurisdictions use to help not just produce, but also protect and increase the number of affordable units within a jurisdiction. So the first policy is an inclusionary housing policy. The City of Hollister is actually working with our general plan consultant, PlaceWorks, to develop an inclusionary housing policy. And what that is, it requires developers who are constructing a subdivision to include a certain percentage in their subdivision towards affordable housing. The next one is also updating and having an approved housing element. So just like I said, we will be working on a housing element this year. It's going to be a very busy year for our planning department, but within that, it will provide different zoning policies, infill options, and mixed type housing that can be able to produce and help increase the number of units within the community that's needed, but also address affordable housing. The next section, or the next point, is accessory dwelling units. So with the same grant that we're helping to assist with the inclusionary policy, we received a grant to be able to create pre-approved accessory dwelling unit site plans. So what that means is that an applicant can be able to come into the city planning office and choose a pre-approved site plan, so they're not having an additional expense. And we are going to have a qualified consultant be able to assist with those site plans. And so we will be releasing a request for proposal sometime in the new year, so that we can be able to have that option for individuals. Additionally, other housing tools are state and federal grants. So some things like our first-time home buyer program is through the home grant, and there are also low-income housing tax credits that help low-income developers help pay for their projects. So those are just some tools that are used to help produce affordable housing. I've kind of gone over this. I blended the two, but just like I said previously, we are going to complete a request for proposal for ADU site plans. We also did release a request for proposal for a qualified consultant to help complete our housing element. So our housing element will actually be due this time next year. And the request for proposal was released in early December and is due January 10th, 2023. At that point, once all the proposals have been submitted, staff will review and be able to submit a contract to a qualified candidate to assist us with that. At this time, I just really appreciate your Planning Commission taking an effort to be able to learn just a little bit, very surface level. We can always go more detail, but it is a very difficult topic, and it's also a very sometimes confusing topic as well. So if there are any questions at this time, I'm more than willing to answer them now, and if I don't know the answer, I can provide it at a later time as well. So thank you.
Any questions? Could you go back one slide?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Was it this one?
Yes. Let's see. So, submit ADU site plan request for proposal. So, you're getting bids from companies to do what exactly?
Yes. So the request for proposal will request qualified architects to be able to develop and create a site plan so that it already is approved by the city, approved by building, approved by planning, so that when they come and they choose, let's say they come in the office and they want to build an accessory dwelling unit, the pre-approved site plan can be an option for them, so that they're not having to go have the additional expense of finding an architect, paying for that architect to develop one. We are going to have very detailed and quality products that people can be able to choose, because staff does not have the licensing to have that. That's why we're submitting that request for proposal. So kind of be like you're going into a restaurant and you're choosing what option you'd like. It'd be something like that.
Okay, so then the company that has the winning, or one of the winning proposals, would be the ones helping to build for somebody?
They don't necessarily need to help to build. We would just really actually like the plans, just like in the last topic when we were talking about sometimes our site plans aren't very detailed. It will literally, we're just paying for the signed paper for them. They don't necessarily have to be the company to build them. It could be any approved company that is received by our planning and building department.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, we'll move on to new business item 2, City of Hollister 2023 Planning Commission calendar.
Good evening, Planning Commission, Senior Planner Amber Cameron. So the item before you tonight is, as mentioned, the City of Hollister's 2023 Planning Commission calendar. Recently, staff has been getting many inquiries from the general public as well as potential applicants about upcoming meetings, and we felt that it would be appropriate to provide the upcoming year's calendars in advance notice, so the general public, the project applicants, and the Planning Commission are aware of the regularly scheduled meetings as well as the potential scheduling of any study sessions. Within your packet, you'll be able to see that this particular calendar, we tried to demonstrate when the regular scheduled meetings for the Planning Commission would be. They were listed in blue. Those typically take place every fourth Thursday of the month. Sorry, it looks like.
Are you supposed to be showing a calendar right now, or?
I don't.
Oh, okay.
I think we could pull it up. We have it in the file. So every fourth Thursday, and then for the green that will be displayed, that is scheduling of potential study sessions, and that would take place on every second Thursday of the month. Red was put in there as the observed holidays that the City of Hollister follows. There was a second attachment that was provided. This is the City of Hollister's observed holidays. We also wanted to note that in the month of July, typically this is when City Council will establish a resolution that basically says that the city is on a legislative recess, so there's no business that occurs with the City Council, commissions. So we do anticipate that that will again take place this year. It typically is a resolution that is approved at the beginning of the year by the new council. So we anticipate it either coming at the end of this. Sorry, it will have to be in January because it's the next City Council meeting. So it will be sometime in January. The other thing about this calendar and why it's important that we potentially establish some of these meeting dates is staff needs to reserve the chambers, and we just want to make sure that we are not having on any conflicts or interfere with any other city commissions or committees that are taking place. And then we also just wanted to note that any potential joint study sessions that we would have with the City Council, they would be scheduled as needed, and that they would be pending coordination with the city clerk. So those have not been included on this calendar. The commission, of course, would be advised of these upcoming or pending joint sessions if we were to have them. And we would also like to note that the calendar does not show any special meetings. Those would be hearings that we would make the commission aware of in advance, but that would be subject to availability of the Planning Commission. And again, those are special circumstances. And lastly, this calendar is subject to change, but all of you would be made aware of that in advance. There would also be public noticing of that, so the public would be made aware of it as well. Are there any questions, comments, concerns about this calendar? If not, the staff would ask that the Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving the City of Hollister's 2023 Planning Commission meeting calendar.
Okay. Unless anyone has a issue, I invite someone to make a motion to approve.
I just had a question on the study sessions. So I know the Planning Commission meetings are in person. Are those can those be done via Zoom at all, or?
I believe the answer is no, with the caveat that we would have to follow the government code rules or the Brown Act rules for Zoom, so it wouldn't be, you'd just be able to Zoom, but technically in the Brown Act, you can Zoom if you make yourself available in a public space and the public is notified of that space. So short answer, no, with a technicality.
Yeah, and those laws are actually changing in the new year, but it's essentially the same answer, no, but there are exceptions. So if you ever needed to attend remotely, if you coordinated with staff and the city attorney in advance, we could probably make it happen, but only one person, not the whole commission.
Got it.
Okay, so do you have a draft resolution prepared for this?
Was it not in here?
Yeah, no, it's attachment 3.
Only the calendar.
What would the number be?
I have assigned 25 to the item regarding right 13 and 26 to the zoning amendment. So this would be 2022-27. And this is our draft resolution.
Okay. Any further discussion from the commission? Then I'll go ahead and make a motion that we adopt the Planning Commission meeting calendar for the year 2023. I would say subject to the draft resolution 2022-27.
Perfect.
All right.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Resolution passes 4-0. Moving on to old business.
I do not believe I have any old business.
Okay. Planning Department reports.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Planning Commission reports. Anyone in the commission have something they'd like to report?
Mr. Chair, I had the pleasure of attending the swearing-in ceremony for their new mayor, and want to also thank the outgoing mayor for all his work that he did for the city, and congratulate also Roland Resendez and Dolores Morales for winning their campaigns for their city council positions, and also thanking Anitra Gomez for outgoing treasurer, and Gordon Machado as the new treasurer. And you know, the theme was, I was there to thank our mayor for his civic service, and also to congratulate the new or the city council people that are regained their seats, and also our new mayor, Mia Casey, and to work together and collaborate and continue to be positive and respectful and be prepared, follow the golden rule, and good things happen. That's my report.
Thank you for that, and I concur with everything you said. Anything else? Okay. We could get a motion to adjourn.
Second. Do you need you need a
I,
motion?
I'm asking for, I was asking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.